and I hope Trax picks this up because it could make for some interesting discussion on his channel, and that is, now that Brock Lesnar is the WWE Champion, who does he wrestle? We know who his first opponent's going to be next month, but if he holds on to that title for longer than 1 month, which he should, who are some of the potential opponents for Brock Lesnar? Now, this is assuming that Brock would have agreed to work some additional pay-per-view dates between now and WrestleMania 31, which I think is his last date under contract. At least those were the reports when he first came back and how long he was going to be under contract for. It may have even come out. I don't remember exactly, but I just know that he's in until WrestleMania 31. I guess at that point they could extend him. Now that pay-per-views are being phased out, you've got the network, things are a little bit different. Would they be willing to pay Brock Lesnar a couple of $1 million to keep him on? I guess that's a question they're going to have to ask. I think he's worth it. I just think he's such a unique performer in that company. He's so different than everybody else, and the Heyman-Lesnar act is so great that I would do whatever I have to do to keep this guy under contract and keep him from going back to UFC and making Dana White a whole bunch of money, but that's just me. So this is assuming that Brock would agree or has maybe already agreed to work 1 or 2 more pay-per-view dates. I don't see him working that many more television shows. I don't see him working any house shows unless it's a really, really big house show that's near where he lives, and then maybe he'd be willing to do it. But this is a list of potential challengers that they might consider even for 1 or 2 B-show defenses over the next several months. We're not talking Raw matches. Brock Lesnar should not be wrestling on Raw. I think Paul Heyman made that comment on TV once. Brock Lesnar does not wrestle for free. I agree with that. We have John Cena. John Cena has already been announced as the number 1 contender. He is getting his rematch with Lesnar at Night of Champions, September 21st. I think that they're rushing into this match way too quickly, but that's just the nature of the beast, I guess. And he's due a rematch, so it's going to be Cena-Lesnar 3. I'm not counting their Backlash match from 11 years ago, so please don't throw that in my face. The question here is, would they put the title back on John Cena so quickly to get him to number 16? There were a lot of mentions about the number 16 at SummerSlam. 16 suplex. I think it was actually 15 Germans and then 1 regular suplex, but let's just say 16 suplexes. John Cena got dropped on his head at SummerSlam. I think the match went 16 minutes long. Maybe just a coincidence. But to me, it worries me that this is part of a story that they're going to want to tell, where in the end, John Cena gets his revenge, and it happens to be number 16 in terms of the 16th world title that he wins. Now, here's what I think. Maybe they don't want an absentee champion, and Brock is not working more pay-per-views. He's not open to it. I don't care how much money you pay me. I'm not doing it. I have my dates, and I'm happy, and that's it. Let's say that's the case. Would they have Cena win, only to have Seth Rollins then cash in Money in the Bank and beat him for the title that same night? Or maybe even the next night on Raw. I personally don't see them wasting John Cena's record-tying 16th reign when he ties Ric Flair, even though Ric Flair has won more than 16 titles. But that's the number of reigns they love to promote for Flair. I just think it would be a huge waste to finally have Cena win number 16, which he is going to at some point, and then 5 minutes later, or 24 hours later, have him drop the belt to somebody else. But if they did, I can't say I would be completely upset about the possibility of a Seth Rollins versus Dean Ambrose Hell in a Cell match in October for the title. Of course, that begs the question, what do you do with John Cena in that case? If Cena's not wrestling for the title, then you may as well just keep the title on Brock Lesnar. It's not like Rollins and Ambrose need a title. But with the kind of matches these guys have been having and the reactions they've been getting from the fans, I could buy into it. And I bet you Joe Blow in the crowd, who's not on the internet, talking about this stuff or doesn't know anything about these guys' backgrounds on the indies and has been following them all their lives and all that kind of stuff, they could buy into that match too. I mean, these guys are that good, and they've been promoted really as main eventers from day one as members of the Shield. It's not as though I think people look at them a few notches below. They're pretty much in that main event mix. Maybe they're not right at the tippy top. They're not there yet, but they're right in that main event mix. I don't think people would have a problem at all if they wanted to go in that direction. I mean, it could even help elevate both guys to that next level in the eyes of the fans if they're wrestling for the top title in the company. Hey, it worked for Rock and Mick Foley. Late 98, early 99. Those guys went back and forth. I don't need to see Rollins and Ambrose trading the title back 5 million times like those guys did. But they had enough matches, Rock and Foley did, and they were positioned in the main event. You know, Austin wasn't really involved in that feud. It went on for about 2 or 3 months. And I think in a lot of ways it really helped cement those guys in that top position. And Rock went on to headline WrestleMania against Austin in 99. So you could draw those comparisons. I'd have no problem with it. I still, at the end of the day, would not take the title off Brock Lesnar. I just think it would be a huge mistake. It would just be a huge mistake after what they did at SummerSlam, as perfect as it was. And now they've got this monster of a guy who's got their championship held hostage, and they could run with this for months, and instead they panic, or maybe they don't panic. Maybe it's part of their plan all along. Let's get Cena to 16. Let's get him that big win at Night of Champions. You're going to have a lot of really pissed off network subscribers, I think, if you do that. I think Cena has to go out there and have a competitive match. You can't do the same match you did at SummerSlam twice. It won't work. Cena has to come back, make it maybe a no DQ match so Cena can use weapons and stuff, and he just has to go out there and just go head on against Brock and show some life and show some offense this time and have a more competitive match. But in the end, whether he has to cheat or he does it clean like he did last Sunday, Brock wins. It's the only outcome here that really does make sense. Brock has to win. He's got to keep the belt, but Cena does have to look competitive. You can't make him look like a pussy 2 months in a row. You know, you do it one time. A one-time squash, the way they did it last weekend, is fine. But then you reach that point where, okay, people are looking forward to this pay-per-view main event. You can't have another squash match 2 months in a row. You know, Cena has to show some kind of life this time. And it's weird because, you know, they had him cut that promo on Raw. I think it was on the Go Home show before SummerSlam. And Cena's out there and he's like, listen, I know what I'm up against at SummerSlam, and I want you people to know you're going to see a side of me that you've never seen before. You're going to see an evil side of John Cena. You're going to see, you know, a mean side of me that hasn't really come out before. And we didn't see any of that at SummerSlam. So I'm not really sure what the hell was the point of that promo now that I think about it. I almost forgot about that. They've got to show some of that at the next pay-per-view, but Brock should not be losing. We have Batista. What about Batista? He was out, right, promoting his Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and he may still be doing promotion for it if the movie is being released in international markets. I think the lion's share of his promotion for it now is done, or it's coming to an end. And he has said he is going to be back. He's under contract. I think when he came back, it was a 2-year contract, I think he said in interviews. And so he's got plenty of time left with WWE. Do you do a Brock Lesnar versus Batista feud once the Cena feud has run its course? I think that would be a big match. I think a lot of people would love to see it. I think it might be the only way you could get people to cheer for Batista. I don't think Batista comes back to feud with Brock Lesnar and gets booed the way that he was booed when he came back before. I'm not going to say he's going to be 100% cheered, but I do think that people would look at him more as a babyface and not as, you know, boo Tista, we don't want to see you, we don't want you back. Because he's not coming back to take a spot from, you know, the beloved Daniel Bryan, which is what really ticked off a lot of people back in January. You know, he's coming back in this case to go up against another part-time guy who a lot of people don't like. You know, Brock has his fans. You know, I'm a fan of Brock Lesnar, but there are a lot of people who don't like the guy. And they don't think he deserves to be the champion. They don't think he deserved to be the one to end the Undertaker's streak. They're appalled by this. So I think it could work. You know, face-heel dynamic, two big guys who never have had a real feud on WWE television before. I think they had a match in OVW when they were first starting out, but they never really wrestled. They never had a feud. They never wrestled for the championship. That'd be a big-time match. I think they could definitely do it. I guess the only question then would be when. Do you do it on a B show? Do you do it at Survivor Series? I think Brock and Batista as the main event of Survivor Series absolutely would work. I mean, they teased this feud as a possibility earlier this year on Raw. Very briefly, there was an in-ring promo. If you remember, Lesnar and Heyman were in the ring, and Batista was in the ring too, and they kind of in a very subtle way teased the idea that, hey, maybe these guys are going to wrestle at some point, and then they never went back to it. I think we could definitely see it, and Survivor Series would probably be the place to do it. I wouldn't have Batista win. I still would keep the belt on Brock. I'd keep the belt on Brock through Mania next year, but it would make for a big match. What about Big Show? Big Show and Brock have a history together. Big Show and Brock wrestled at the Royal Rumble earlier this year, if you can call it wrestling. It was more of an angle than a match. Brock went out there with a steel chair, and he beat the piss out of Big Show, and that was kind of it. That was really all that there was to it. There was never any follow-up. There was never a rematch. Before that match took place, I think I said on the podcast here, I was kind of looking forward to Brock and Big Show. And that surprised some people because they didn't think it would really be a good match. I remember back in 2003, these two guys having a hell of a stretcher match at one of the Judgment Day pay-per-views. It might have been that year. They went out there and with this god-awful stipulation because stretcher matches in WWE are freaking lame. Okay, the fact that you have to get a guy in a gurney and roll him across a line, I mean, what is this, a fucking game show? I just think the way they use that stipulation is so stupid. But they made it work in that match, and I thought they had a hell of a match. They had some good matches during that feud. That was also 11 years ago. And you're talking about two big guys now who are 11 years older, whose bodies are 11 years older. I'm not expecting them to go out there and have a great match, but there is the history there if they wanted to go back there. You know, Big Show is looking to slay the beast and get revenge on Lesnar for that chair assault on him at the Royal Rumble. And as a one-off on pay-per-view on one of the B shows, I wouldn't have a problem with that at all, provided that Brock wins. So Big Show could be a challenger for him if he's going to have some matches between now and Rumble, or between now and Mania. You could do Brock and Big Show on a B show, you could do Brock and Big Show again at the Rumble and come back with it, only this time let them have an actual match. What about Mark Henry, Big Show's new tag team partner? Mark Henry, no less than twice on Raw, several months ago, came out to confront Brock Lesnar and had the shit kicked out of him. He got F5'd on the floor, and there was never any mention of it again after that. They never revisited it. There was never a match between the two of them, obviously, because Brock's not wrestling on TV. But Henry is another guy who has history with Brock. Again, he's been laid out and never got a match out of it. It would be a fresh match that we haven't seen this go-around. I think the two of them had a match one time on SmackDown back in 2002, and that was it. I remember being impressed by it, too, because Brock got Mark Henry up for the F5 and held him up there on his shoulders and then gave him the move. And that's when I knew, wow, this guy is a beast. So I'm just putting Henry's name out there. It could be another potential B-show title defense if they wanted to go in that direction. I probably would not. They've got Henry slotted with Rusev now, plus he's doing the tag team thing with Big Show. You know, if Brock did agree to do some B shows, I would think maybe 2 at the most, plus Survivor Series and Rumble, and that's it. You know, he doesn't even have to wrestle in February. I wouldn't have him wrestling in February, so really we're looking at 2 potential opponents. I don't know that I would waste it on Henry. I'm just putting his name on there because there is a history there and they could go in that direction. Then that brings us to Cesaro. Cesaro, they have some work to do here, but it is still doable if they build Cesaro back up and then play off his history with Paul Heyman. The idea of Cesaro showing off his strength and getting a few spots in where he throws Brock around the way that Brock throws other people around, the way that Brock threw around John Cena like a rag doll last Sunday. The idea of having Cesaro get a few spots in there where he does the same thing to Brock, and Brock actually shows some moments of weakness and really gets the crowd into it and gets the crowd to rally around Cesaro, that he might be the guy to take the title from him. You know, the guy who body slammed Big Show out of the ring at the Andre the Giant Battle Royal at WrestleMania. Feels like a lifetime ago, given what they've done with Cesaro, but that was probably the biggest moment of his career up to that point. A match between Lesnar and Cesaro, I think it's right up there with Batista. I think Cesaro is one of those guys, of all the guys I'm listing here, who makes the most sense if they can build him back up. They've done such a horrendously poor job of making Cesaro mean anything over the last few months, ever since WrestleMania. He's done nothing. The pairing with him and Heyman, which had so much potential, was a failure. It did nothing to help Heyman. It didn't tie into the Lesnar story at all. I thought they would build up some jealousy there. Heyman comes out every single week. He's crowing about, my client broke the streak. At some point, Cesaro just kind of turns to him and says, hey, what about me? What am I? But they didn't do it. And it sure as hell didn't do anything for Cesaro, so I still fail to see what that pairing did for any of the people involved. It just killed time. That's really all it did. It killed time while Brock was away for Heyman to have somebody to go out there with until it was time for Brock to come back and play. But they could have gotten so much more out of it. If they pull their head out of their ass, they could still salvage him and make him a believable opponent for Lesnar if he starts winning matches now. Okay, they got to start right now. He beat Jack Swagger on Monday night. It was, a big deal. But he should be winning more matches week after week after week and start building this guy back up so that when Royal Rumble rolls around, you could do Lesnar versus Cesaro. And Cesaro doesn't win, but I think that even in defeat, that match could help Cesaro get over to that next level, even if he loses. He could come close, but in the end, he fails. Those guys go out there, you give them 12, 15, 20 minutes, they have a great match. This guy, he's made. Now you finally built Cesaro back up to a level where people can buy him, if not as a main eventer, at something close to that level. And it shows that Brock is not invincible. It shows that Brock can be beaten, but even this guy couldn't get the job done. And then you go to WrestleMania from there, because I don't think Brock should defend in February. You go to WrestleMania, and whoever it is, whether it's, Roman Reigns or whoever, they finally slay the beast and get the big win. Kurt Angle is another interesting one. Latest reports suggest that Kurt reached out to Triple H about coming back to WWE with a limited schedule, and Triple H basically blew him off. And so Kurt, not one to take no for an answer, apparently reached out to Vince McMahon directly, and Vince told him, hey, Paul's the one who makes those decisions now. You got to deal with him. And when Triple H found out about it, he was livid. He was livid that Kurt Angle went over his head to Vince. Sounds to me like Vince really does not want Kurt Angle back. He knows the issues that he's gone through before. Supposedly, there's the story that years ago he made it very well known to people in the company that he didn't want an Olympic gold medalist to die on his watch. He just did not want that stench attached to him and his company. So, who knows? Whether it was Triple H, his hands were tied, he was kind of acting as the bad cop, he knew what Vince wanted, and so he told Kurt, we're not interested. Or maybe Triple H really doesn't like Kurt, and he doesn't want Kurt back himself because he knows Kurt can be a train wreck. Whatever the case may be, it definitely seems like they're not going to want Kurt back now after that little stunt that he supposedly pulled. And it's a shame, too, because the timing could not be more perfect with his TNA contract expiring next month. It's really a shame that Kurt wrecked his body because a healthy Kurt Angle, even at 45 years old, could have a good match with Brock Lesnar. I know the Brock Lesnar we saw in 2003 is not the same Brock Lesnar today, but I still think those two would bring out the best in each other because they're so damn competitive, especially with each other. Always probably one guy probably thinks he's better than the other. There was always that competition between the two of them. Given how fragile Kurt Angle is at this point, he's seemingly made of glass. Every time he comes back in TNA, he's out with another injury. He tore this or his knee or his neck or whatever it may be. I would just as soon rather not see him back in the ring, let alone go in there with a guy like Lesnar who would freaking kill him. But we're just talking possibilities here. Lots of you seem to think that if Kurt Angle does come back, a match with Rusev would make the most sense. USA versus Russia. I guess so, but Rusev is coming off a feud with a guy that used the ankle lock as his finish. All Rusev's been doing lately is selling the ankle. So now he's going to go right into another feud where his opponent's finishing move targets the ankle. Kurt back in a WWE ring seems very unlikely at this point, but if the circumstances were different, one more Angle versus Lesnar feud could have been money, in my opinion. Daniel Bryan. David Shoemaker of Grantland tweeted this week that he's been hearing Bryan needs Tommy John surgery, which is where they replace a ligament in the elbow with a tendon they find somewhere else in your body. Those in WWE reportedly say that decision still has not been made. They're not confirming it. They're not denying it. They're just saying that he may need surgery. He may not need surgery. They're not saying what it is, but that's all up in the air at this point. You mostly hear about pitchers in baseball having Tommy John surgery. It's actually named after a former pitcher. As a Mets fan, I am all too familiar with that surgery. We've got two pitchers out right now recovering from it, Bobby Parnell and Matt Harvey. No relation to Jeff Harvey of the legendary Harvey Brothers tag team. Thank you, Mike Adamle. You also hear stories of more and more parents having doctors perform the surgery on their kids because they think it'll help them throw harder. I'm always amazed when I read stories like that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with their kid's arm, but they want somebody to cut them open and have holes drilled into their arm so that maybe they'll be able to pitch better. I remember reading a story about this. James Andrews, whose name wrestling fans will know because many wrestlers swear by the guy whenever they need to be operated on. He's the guy who repaired both of Triple H's quads. He's WWE's go-to guy, but he's also the go-to guy for a lot of other athletes. He's kind of the guy who perfected the operation. And he'll have parents come to him with their perfectly healthy kid to get the surgery, and he'll refuse out of principle. And they get angry with him. Parents like that should have their kids taken away from them until they complete a psych evaluation. It's too bad their parents didn't take them to a brain surgeon to be operated on when they were kids to make them smarter. It just pisses me off whenever I hear about that. When I hear Tommy John, I always think now of the idiotic parents who do that kind of thing now. But anyway, if Bryan does get the surgery, if what Shoemaker tweeted out turns out to be true, that would put him out another 3 months. Pitchers usually miss a long time. They miss an entire season and then some. So we're talking like 12 to 18 months usually that a pitcher will miss. Bryan's not out there hurling fastball, so I doubt he'd have to be out that long. From what Bryan has said in interviews, his neck is fine. It's just the nerve issue in his arm that he's been dealing with. He still has no strength in his right arm. So if all goes well, that would put him right on target for a comeback right around Royal Rumble if they wanted to hold him out a little bit of extra time, which is what I would do. So even if at the end of December he gets a clean bill of health, he's cleared to wrestle, I'd hold him out until the Rumble and really build up his return. But back to Bryan and Brock, how this ties into Brock Lesnar. It was supposed to be the SummerSlam main event this year. Didn't happen that way. Would they have had Lesnar go in there and destroy Bryan the way he did Cena? That I don't know. I think because Cena was the top guy, they were trying to tell a story with Cena. I would think that with Bryan they would have had a more competitive match, but who knows? Bryan's smaller than Cena. Maybe they would have had Bryan in there get crushed in 5 minutes. We'll never know. I think they did what they did with Cena to shock people. He's Superman. He's the 15-time champion. He's been the face of the company for the last 10 years. Bryan is none of those things, other than he's a great wrestler who could probably give Brock the best match of his WWE run this time around, or at least the kind of match that Punk gave him last year. So maybe they would have had a more competitive match for that reason, but the end result would have been the same. Brock wins the title in decisive fashion. I still would like to see the match. It would make for a nice comeback story if Bryan actually beat him, but he doesn't have to. I'd be fine with Brock winning. The question is, when will Bryan be ready to return? How will the fans react to him when he actually does come back? And if they react big, would they put him back in the title picture right away? If so, and he can make it back in time for the Royal Rumble, you could have Bryan win the Rumble, which would be poetic after being left out of the match this year, and the big uproar from the fans because he didn't come out at number 30, and do Bryan versus Brock at WrestleMania. But there's so many different factors that are in play here. The stars, I think, would have to align perfectly for Bryan to be healed up by the Rumble and for the fans to still be as hot for him as they were earlier this year. I would love to see it because I think in the end we would get a great match out of it, but I think it's almost like things have to work out a little too perfectly for that to happen. And it also ties into the last guy here, and that's Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns is seemingly on the fast track to the championship, probably on the fast track to wrestle for the title, which would be against Brock, most likely at WrestleMania 31 next year. Much like Bryan and Brock, it's a match we've never seen before. Reigns is a lot bigger than Bryan. He's more of a badass than Bryan, so that match might be more popular to people. I'd love to see either one of them. I don't really have a big preference either way. You'd probably get a better wrestling match if Bryan were in there, but Bryan and or Brock and Reigns would be fine to me. I still think that's the most likely scenario. That's probably the end game here for Lesnar. If Brock gets past Night of Champions with the belt, which he should, then I think they go all the way to Mania with him on top. Roman Reigns is going to be that guy. He's the next big star who's well on his way. He'll already be groomed for the top spot by that point. Maybe it ends up being a Randy Orton, Batista, and Evolution type deal where they have plans for one guy, but the other guy, in this case Dean Ambrose, gets more over than Reigns, and he gets the spot instead. I think there's an outside shot of that happening. Not very likely at all. But Ambrose, who knows? Maybe Ambrose makes it there before Reigns does with the reactions that he's been getting. I'm sure they didn't bank on Ambrose getting over more than Roman Reigns, but he is. You know, if Ambrose makes it there before Reigns does, that's really, I think, going to depend on how stubborn WWE is. If they have a plan and they don't want to deviate from it, it's going to be hard. If Ambrose keeps getting those kinds of reactions, though, I think that he's been getting. If that keeps up, it's going to be hard for them to ignore that. But I do think in the end they stay the course with Roman Reigns. Hopefully he continues to get better and improve. And you don't know if Brock's going to stay beyond WrestleMania next year, so why not build him up for a newer, younger guy to be the one to tear him down? Someone you could build your company around for years to come, which realistically you can build around any of those three Shield guys. It looks like Roman Reigns is going to be that guy. So why not go all in?